Sekhar, thank you so much for joining us today. As we begin, can you say a few words about your current role in the organization?
Sure. I work for a company called Elevance Health. We were formerly known as Anthem. That's a
Hmm.
relatively more well-known name, and I've been here for coming up on 4 years. The role I have here is interesting. And for people who don't know, Elevance Health is a 125,000 employee associates, as we call them, company,
Hmm.
Fortune 2025. 100 billion plus. I think the last time we checked was around 86 billion, plus in revenue. But the role is essentially the global head of cyber defense and cyber threat management.
Hmm.
That broadly goes from defense strategy to inclusive of the Cyber Fusion Center or Cyber Operations Center, incident response, detection engineering, threat hunting,
Hmm.
anything related to threat intelligence, adversary emulation, brand resiliency,
Hmm.
detection and response engineering, data loss prevention, data protection, and insider risk. So that's a quick snapshot of the purview that me and my team have to you
Yeah.
know deal
Well,
with.
looks like you have a lot on your plate.
Yeah, we often go around with crosshairs on our back. Healthcare, similar to other financial verticals or any critical infrastructure,
Hmm.
carries its burden, and as part of that comes great responsibility. So
Absolutely.
our
And you have
purpose.
experience prior to that. You had Visa, was it Sallie Mae? You had experience in the financial services, so you go from one regulated industry to the other. You work for the city, I think, for some time.
Yep.
But how did you get into cybersecurity? What was the first door that you knocked on?
The first lure, interestingly enough, I got into it quite by accident. I used to work, several years ago in my early start at the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, also known colloquially as the Federal Reserve Board, the
Mm.
one that sets the interest rates and so on. Back then, I used to work for the chairman who coined the phrase irrational exuberance.
I remember. I
There you
remember.
go. So, as part of that, I used to work in what was then called the Automation and Research Computing, you know,
Hmm.
group organization. And part of our purview was a couple of different, departments or divisions at the
Hmm.
board. And part of that was inclusive of the Monetary Affairs Division, which actually sets interest rates.
Hmm.
There was a good amount of research that used to happen. Part of that was one fine day, someone had sent an inappropriate email to someone high up in the organization. And my then manager comes to me and said, "Can you figure this out?" And needless to say, back then it was a little more simplistic. I, literally had to go, tracing terminal by terminal. And we finally figured out who it was. It was a, simple research assistant, who just had a little bit too much time on their hands and who essentially, logged into actual terminal ports and used an old, insecure protocol called Telnet, which we still have, and sent that as an anonymous thing. So that's how that got started. And like, needless
Interesting.
to say, that person left that board, and I tried to shake that off. And when I came to Visa, lo and behold, my manager then again came to me and said, we're looking to do these payment systems that are going to be deployed, across 200 plus countries. Can you build me an attack profile for it? By then I had wandered off into networks and so on, and the monkey came back to me, and we're like, "Oh, okay, all right." So that got me started on payments fraud and so on and so forth. And needless to say, here we are, still doing cybersecurity.
It's
I guess
amazing. It's amazing. What
that,
an interesting story. Telnet. That brings back memories.
yeah,
Technology changes, but human nature doesn't change. People look for.
human nature doesn't change, devices change, but there are some foundational gaps, yeah, that are still exploitable.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. And well, the world has changed uh, partially due to technology. I think technology plays such a ever increasing role in our lives on a
Yeah,
personal level, at a family level, company level, country level, global, I think it's only going to increase. And as a
Mm-hmm.
result, the attack surface is ever expanding as a result. So I think that's part of the reason why so many people looking at the space. I think there's a lot more awareness of cybersecurity. I think everyone viscerally understands how things can go wrong if someone gets access to your bank account or your ATM card or whatnot. And you read in the news about hackers and scams and all those things. And I think as a result, because of this awareness, a lot of more people kind of know that this opportunity exists in terms of a career and are looking to take courses or certifications or maybe switch from technology to cybersecurity. For someone who's just starting on the journey, what will be your advice from the vantage point of your experience? What do you recommend your 20-year-old self? What should people focus on?
There are plenty of courses and so on and so forth, but foundationally, I would say be a glutton for learning.
Mm.
And what has served me well across is being able to take different cyber viewpoints and take different technological viewpoints so that you can be empathetic about the other person when giving cyber advice. When I look at technology partners and so on, we don't come back and say, this is how it needs to be done. It's more like well, it's not this, but you can do it in this fashion. It's not an
Mhm.
or, but an and. It
Mhm.
is not, we have to align with the business. We have to do that. If the business isn't there, cyber isn't there. So it's always that, how can we do that in a safe and secure fashion?
Mhm.
So looking back, I would say, go for the hard nuts, give some grace to yourself, be a glutton for learning, and, don't chase the title fairy. That'll come. And, when there are hard things, put your hand up and say, I got this. But that's what people are looking for.
Mhm.
Things that don't, people are unwilling to touch with a 10-foot pole. When I was at Visa, we started on this data protection journey, and we've always been extraordinarily good, there. But there was always, how can we stop more determined, malicious entities from accessing crown jewels? And there was a certain amount of reticence in terms of what people would be willing to do and so on. But part of it is executive sponsorship and that visionary thinking and saying, yes, it's a tough nut, but it's legacy building. We'll
Mhm.
do it because it's important. And so that would be general lessons for the 20-year-old.
Mhm.
But at the same time, look at different options, because that helps filter out what you really are good at and what you love doing, and
Mhm.
what you may be really good at but may not love doing. But
Mhm.
it's good to figure out both to see what those initial, what shall I say, things that excite you are, and that'll
Mhm.
keep it going. So for me, it started out with that one chase, and to this day, that chase is still on.
Well, it's kind of like the good guys and the bad guys. It's almost like a never-ending game of chess, right? And you never, you,
It
you, you never run out of different strategies, different tactics, and you have to be two steps
Yeah,
ahead
yeah, and
of
it's
your,
that's
opponent.
exactly it. It's the rules of the jungle, right? Whether you're the antelope or the gazelle or the cheetah, you'd be better be running or hauling ass in the morning, either to get food or not be food.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And what's your kind of to continue a little bit to double click? Some people say, "Hey, try different things," because I mean, cybersecurity is such a vast
Hmm.
area. Some of the portions of it are not even that technical, like GRC. Others more so. I know it can be as uh, really roll up your sleeves pen tester or SOC analyst, or you can be a GRC manager, and there's so many different things in between. Do you recommend? So, two questions: do you recommend going broad and then figuring out which 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 section of cybersecurity to go deep on, with understanding something you can be passionate and curious about for a long time, or like what's your take on that? And the other, what other aspects of like success for a career would you suggest people look into? It could be certifications, it could be mentorship, it could be I don't know, joining associations, or I don't know. There's so many different things. And the reason I'm asking is that there are so many things that one can be doing. What would you double click on? What would you over index on to set people in their 20s or so, or people who are looking to switch careers, like in a mid career? What would you say they should do to set them up for success along those lines?
So I'll tell you what worked for me. Having that broad purview helps, kind of come top down, help narrow it down. So in other words, I started out an engineer, became an IT architect, and then became a cyber architect. So I always had that broad purview in terms of tying, how one could break into systems and so on. And that, using the construct of here's an architecture, here's a data flow, and then breaking it down. So it essentially made me think of every single point in there. It could be pen testing, it could be architecture, and being able to explain it, saying what would be that impact in terms of a risk, in terms of a consequence to confidentiality, integrity, or availability. And being able to have that broad brush purview helped me go down, over a period of time, I had to go down, okay, identity and access. I had to go down, this. So it gives that broad purview. So, and to tie that, you had an interesting question. Would it be certification and so on? I would say yes, because often it it gives a baseline framework of understanding. As an example, CISSP, or, there are several institutions that do those, but they break it into 7 or 8 domains. And it gives a flavor for each of those. It could be GRC, what the framework, it's NIST, it's, ISO, or if it is operations, then it is this. If it is, something else, identity, if it is, it's this, or cloud security. So it gives you a broad perspective of each of those domains. That helps give a better filtering to what, tickles your fancy, and then go down that path. And as you progress in your career, it could be, you might be in operations, you might be in engineering. If you want to become a CISO, the key is to have broad brush perspective on each of those domains, and from a strategy, architecture, operations, engineering point as well. So that XY, framework is extremely important. Outside of all of that, at the end of the day, as a security professional, one thing is extremely tricky is to be able to communicate that in simple terms. And one thing I would say is to build that early art of storytelling since young, not just focus on the technical aspects of it, but have a hand in hand with the soft skills in terms of communicating something simply. I'll give an example. When I was at Visa, I had to go to my pre-K son's class and talk about what do parents do. And I was struggling, monkeying around. How do I explain payments fraud to and the four-party system to pre-K folks? And my son, very simplistically at the time, said, "Dad helps stop sketchy guys." If I'm in the UK, we say he stops dodgy guys. But that was that simplicity, But it brought it to perspective in a single punchline. So being able to communicate in a succinct fashion with executives helps.
Interesting. It makes a lot of sense when you were as you were saying, if you go deep into one area, it's almost like a fork in the road. You choose go pen testing, or you choose go GRC, and the longer you continue on this path, by definition, that cuts off alternative paths for you. And at some point, you may find yourself out of further road. You run out of road. But if you get this exposure, as you said, that gives you optionality along the way, in addition to getting pedigree and getting being seasoned for a more senior role at C level or VP level. It makes a lot of sense.
And it
Go ahead.
might be okay to just go down one path. That might be just fine. But having some broad brush ability to go geometrically or diagonally
Mhm.
out helps even in career growth, where as you keep going down that same thing, you
Mhm.
likely might end up hitting a ceiling. But having some broad brush will position you with greater knowledge to different executive roles that might not be in your own vertical. That might
Mhm.
position you to a different thing where you might take a more diagonal path out. So
Certainly. Certainly. That makes a lot of sense. And communicating clearly, it's certainly, you're talking to people who don't understand technology that well or don't understand cybersecurity, but who understand business, who understand dollars and cents. And being able to communicate clearly sets you up to be where the business person had, in addition to technologist or CISO or cybersecurity or catcher of the sketchy guys. So it's a natural step from clear thinking to clear communicating to being able to be a business person in addition to being a cybersecurity person.
yeah, simple things are, I try not to, I catch myself saying data exfiltration as an example to a executive. I will be more simplistically saying theft of our sensitive data assets or something more simpler that,
Mhm.
resonates with them.
Certainly. No, it makes a lot of sense. Well, and switching gears, we talked about cybersecurity, space technology. The world is changing. Well, it seems like the third wave is AI. People talk about quantum computing and how it's going to impact cryptography and the keys, and there's a lot of things are in the air with
Mhm.
changes. But from yours, from your vantage point, what are the top three challenges, themes, ideas that are top of mind for senior cybersecurity executives these days?
One is, which I'll tie both AI and cyber executive. It's the increasing use of Gen AI for scalable cyber campaigns. And when you tie that with potentially using, how shall I say, inauthentic narratives, when you have, this is, how shall I say, freedom of speech tying in, you can't censor this or that, and there's a certain level of inauthenticity in narratives that could get ahead of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
combined with current events. When you combine all of that, it creates a rather interesting, petri dish of things that could go wrong. So being used, using Gen AI for scalable campaigns, tied with the other part, which is more interesting, is cyber physical threats. Data extortion is increasing, but using the construct of, say, violence as a service to force this, and at the same time, when we saw, United Brian Thompson's assassination, literally, that creates a different, perspective. Where we're saying, oh, here's Brian Thompson with the check marks, and here are the others who are on a list. So, so those are some of the more scarier thoughts, in there. And when you look at large scale, you know, reductions in force and so on, combined with, disgruntlement in general, that creates a different scenario for insider risk. So that's another,
Mm.
area which is, especially in regulated industry, it's something that becomes more and more important. Then the last one is supply chain, using, slivers, of it. We are an interconnected world. In order to, if it's healthcare, to deliver, good service, access to care, information goes back and forth. And it's no different than the financial industry. And it takes one link to break for the others to fall as a domino. So supply chain risk is consistently, worrisome,
Mhm.
if you will.
It was astonishing for me to find out how many open source packages and open source software has been used in the enterprise world. And I also, again, I'm learning. I also realized that a lot of those open source libraries, they're maintained by volunteers effectively,
Mhm.
and some of them have been doing this for years, they burn out, they forget to renew a domain, they something happens to them, and malicious actor would take over the library and then push the update. And from the user perspective, it's looks legitimate. It's from the person who maintains the library, so it automatically gets propagated and installed in everywhere that particular library is used. It's just absolutely stunning. It's almost
Yeah.
and it's a vector.
Having that visibility into your bill of materials is extremely important. One, to provide that assurance, and to also remove that level of risk that you just highlighted.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, no, it makes a lot of sense. I was switching gears a little bit. I know. Well, you mentioned cheetahs and gazelles, and both have to run. And it's also I think of cybersecurity world as kind of a chessboard game, where if the good guys and the bad guys, and they always try to find both the bad guys trying to find the new exploits, and the good guys trying to share knowledge so that they can provide kind of a common front defense. And I think there's a little more awareness in that it's a team sport. And a little bit of a self-serving question, because I know there's a lot of different communities and meetups, associations, and Athena's been around for 4 years. We're always striving to do better and create programs that members find valuable. From your standpoint and from the other groups and associations you're part of, what do you think we can do better or differently? What do you think, what aspect of the community could be enhanced, do you think?
I haven't thought about it yet. And because what I get out of Alfina today is, it's at the right wavelength for me. So I haven't thought about beyond what. Simplistically, it gives a perspective of, here are the top headlines.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the key bullets that one would want to communicate to executives. Here are the general movers and shakers in the industry. Here are opportunities. Here are some advices. So when you look at that, digest that I get, it is crisp and what one could look at. Areas that I would look at is also, here are some additional threats. Here are some more global trends that are happening. So that might be, when you look at the Five Eyes or so on and so forth, here is more distilled intelligence and some areas or suggestions on, here are some interesting capabilities that are coming to play. More on the emerging front with respect to innovative companies and so on, where one could potentially get advanced capabilities for cheaper. So those are areas where one could, and here are some interesting frameworks when we talked about taking an architectural view. And here's back before Gartner bought Burton's Group, one thing I used to love with Burton's Group, it provided that architectural view of capabilities and so on that I used to miss, because Gartner was always this big third factor. Here you do this, that, and the other, but it wasn't always a practitioner, view of things. So if I were to take that and marry up, say, what the Center for Internet Security does, those are areas to think about what the art of the possible could be.
Certainly. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, and I hope, to your point, it's one of the CISO why that you bring up. I think we get good feedback and people like it, but we also want to expand and do more in-person events, and hopefully we'll get to meet around RSA that's coming up. Sekhar, I know we're coming up on time. I guess as we wrap up, a few final questions, and we usually ask if, let's say, you have a crystal ball and you can see into the future, 12 months from now, if we're to have this conversation, or maybe 2 years from now, what are 2, 3 themes, ideas, threat vectors, technologies that CISOs will be obsessed about, anxious about, curious about, and not too distant future?
I think couple are consistently going to be there is going to be AI. I mean, we've reached, I think, a critical point. There's been a lot of promise. I think this year is going to be more of put up or shut up, in terms of capabilities, delivering that. And we've started to see adversarial AI, slowly keep building. I think we're going to see more of that. I suspect that exploitation or those capabilities of one, how do we infuse AI, agentic AI and so on to
Mm-hmm.
better, be more effective and efficient for cybersecurity is going to be one. Effectiveness and the velocity of adversarial AI is going to be the second one. And how do we defend, AI ML systems is going to be that those are the three facets, if you will, of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And doing it at a rapid scale is where that, I think you mentioned quantum. How quickly are we going to get to that? And, that level of speed is where I think that's going to come into play. And how, when you talk financial systems, it becomes post quantum. Are we resistant? I still think that some of our card readers are still triple DES. I don't know if we've completely transitioned our, point of sale terminals off of triple DES into even AES, coming to think of it. I think that itself is a journey. So, yeah, quantum and being able to do that, that's going to be I suspect the other thing.
Yeah, the biggest challenge. It feels like the velocity of change is accelerating. It's well, someone said the quote that kind of stuck with me, and they said humanity has the built of a caveman and uh, with medieval institutions, but technologies from gods. So this we're built for. We evolved in a completely different time, and we still have legacy institutions, but technology keeps accelerating, and I hope we can latch on to this rocket
Yeah.
and not go crazy in the process. But this was a very interesting conversation, Sekhar. I really appreciate you taking time. Where can people find you if listeners want to have a question over the chat?
Thank you, Misha. People can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to,
Mm-hmm.
get a hold of me.
Certainly. Well, this was great. I hope we'll get to do it again.
Thank you, Misha. Appreciate it. Thank you.